Hello, you're on the House of Stories channel. Vitali with you. I'm truly glad to see everyone who's dropped by today. Before the story begins, please tell us what city you're listening from. For us, this isn't just geography. It's the warmth of your hearts that warms our home. Let's begin. The suitcase landed at her feet with a heavy, precise crunch. The lock couldn't withstand the impact with the cobblestones. The zipper snapped, and everything Elena had left from her past life spilled out into the gray November slush. Her white knit sweater instantly absorbed the dirt, turning into a heavy rag. The medical reference book fanned out, and the wind immediately began tearing the wet pages. Elena didn't even have time to flinch. She stood there in her house clothes, and her coat draped over her open one, looking at her things in the puddle, unable to breathe. It felt like she'd been thrown down the stairs with her suitcase. You came here with nothing, and you'll leave with nothing. Vadim's voice sounded from above, indifferent and harsh. He stood on the top step of the porch, his hands stuffed into the pockets of his expensive coat, a landlord who'd just thrown out an annoying cat. Pick up your rags and leave my property, he continued, without even raising his voice. You have 5 minutes. Before the village security kicks you out through the barrier. The wind hit her face like sleet, bringing Elena back to her senses. A strange, ringing emptiness formed inside. 10 years of marriage, 10 years of care, comfort, and warmth. All of this fit into one broken suitcase and 5 minutes to pack. In one. She was surprised at how firm her voice sounded, even though everything inside was shaking. Misha's documents, his medical record, and prescriptions are still there in the house. He needs his medication this evening, and my documents, passport, diploma, and grandma's ring are in the safe. You know, they're a memento. They're the only thing I have left of my family. Vadim slowly descended one step. That same disdainful half-smile he usually bestowed on errant subordinates played on his lips. Documents? He asked, his gaze lazily gliding over the dirt at her feet. Oh, yeah. He picked up something red lying at the edge of the puddle with the toe of his patent leather boot. It was her diploma as a cardiologist with honors. Vadim, without changing his expression, simply pushed the red crust aside with his foot, and it slid straight into the murky water. It seems there it is. Take it. And about the safe? He grinned, looking her straight in the eyes. And there was so much coldness in that look that Elena shivered. Don't bother, Lena. I changed the cat on the safe a week ago. I've prepared. Everything that's left there, jewelry, your ridiculous savings, consider it rent for the fact that you lived in comfort, ate my food, and slept on my sheets. Elena felt the ground slipping out from under her feet. A week ago. A week ago they had dinner together. He poured her tea, asked how her day went, and he himself had already come up with a new cat. He already knew that he'll rob her and throw her out the door like a thief. You're a terrible person, Vadim, she said quietly. You didn't just steal things, you stole my family's memories. I took compensation for the lost years, he snapped. Now go away, time is ticking. The sound of an approaching car silenced them. The heavy wrought iron gates smoothly slid open, letting in a familiar silver sedan. The car's tires softly crunched on the gravel and stopped a meter from Elena, the warmth from the heated hood enveloping her. The driver's door opened. Inessa Pavlovna stepped out. Elena's heart sank. Her mother-in-law looked impeccable. An expensive fur coat, perfect hair. It was difficult to recognize in this stately, energetic woman the exhausted, gray from pain patient she had been 5 years ago. Memory immediately threw up an image. A stuffy bedroom, the smell of medicine clinging to the skin. Elena was changing the sheets. Inessa Pavlovna was crying from helplessness, clinging to Elena's hand with fingers as thin as birds' feet. Helen, don't abandon me, my dear. Only you have light hands. Cook some porridge, the way you know how. Inessa Pavlovna slammed the car door and headed for the porch. Her gaze slid over Elena, then over the scattered laundry in the mud. Not a muscle moved on her face. She carefully sidestepped the puddle, as if afraid of getting dirty in someone else's grief. "Inessa Pavlovna," Elena said, taking a step forward, holding out her hand. "Mama, you see, you know the truth. My family's money, my grandmother's, is in the foundation of this house. I pulled you back from the brink of death." My mother-in-law stopped and slowly turned her head. There was no sympathy or anger in her eyes, only an icy, impenetrable indifference. "You, my dear, are a doctor," she said in an even, well-controlled voice. "Treating people is your duty. You did your job. For that you were fed, clothed, and given a roof over your head? We're even. We're even." Elena choked on such monstrous logic. "I became your daughter when you were ill. I slept by your bed. And now I'm fine." Inessa Pavlovna straightened the collar of her fur coat, and Vadim needs to move on. He needs a normal family, his own children, heirs of the blood, and not what you dragged into this house. A woman who can't give her husband a child is a barren flower in our family. Elena, beside herself with despair, instinctively touched the sleeve of her expensive fur coat. "How can you?" Inessa Pavlovna froze. She looked at the spot where she had touched him with an expression of extreme physical disgust. She jerked her hand away, slowly unzipped her purse, pulled out a damp wipe, and looking straight into Elena's eyes, began to carefully and firmly wipe the sleeve where her daughter-in-law had touched it, as if she were wiping away dirt, as if Elena were contagious. Then she crumpled the wipe and tossed it into the mud, where it settled on Elena's favorite sweater. "Don't you dare touch me. Your place is there, outside the gate." She turned and went up to her son. Vadim opened the door for his mother, and they disappeared into the warm, bright house. The lock clicked. Elena was left alone in the empty courtyard. The wind ruffled her hair. She slowly crouched down and began packing her things into the broken suitcase. A dirty sweater, a wet, ruined diploma, a book with soggy pages. Her hands were shaking, but she forced herself to act. Stand up. Close the suitcase. Grab the handle. She dragged her burden toward the exit, feeling the neighbors' gazes from the windows on her back. As soon as she crossed the line, the gate clanged shut behind her, cutting off her past life. Her phone vibrated in her coat pocket. The name Zhana Koretnikova appeared on the screen. Elena pressed answer, raising the phone to her ear. "Hello." "So, Lenusha, have you packed your things?" Zhana's voice on the other end sounded cheerful, with a hint of triumphant venom. "I'm looking out the window. I see you walking there. Vadik asked me to tell you not to forget to empty the locker at work. It will be more convenient for me to put my change of shoes there. The space is taken, dear. At home, in life, and at work. Get used to it." Elena lowered her hand with the phone. It was a gray, cold November day. She adjusted the collar of her coat, adjusted the handle of her suitcase, and took the first step along the wet road toward the bus stop, toward the unknown, toward the place where she would survive for her son. The old apartment greeted Elena with the scent of the past, a mixture of book dust, dry air, and the faintest hint of vanilla that always reminded her of her grandmother. It was a one-room apartment in a 5-story building on the outskirts, a one-room apartment she had kept on principle all these years, as if sensing that one day this fallback would become her only refuge. It now seemed cramped after the spacious halls of Vadim's mansion. But it was quiet here and safe. Misha was asleep on the fold-out sofa, curled up under a scratchy wool blanket. He sobbed softly in his sleep. Children, like sensitive seismographs, unerringly detect catastrophe in the family, even when adults try to force a smile. Elena sat in the kitchen, clutching a cup of long cold tea. A gray, chilly dawn was breaking outside. Insomnia pounded in her temples. Yesterday seemed like a bad dream, but the dirt on the coat hanging in the hallway and the broken lock on the suitcase were irrefutable proof of reality. She had to move on. She had to go to work, where Jana now ran the place. She had to take her son to kindergarten, explaining why his father no longer lived with them. She stood, feeling the heaviness in every movement. A pale woman with dark shadows under her eyes was reflected in the bathroom mirror. "Pull yourself together, Skvortsova," she ordered herself silently. "You're a cardiologist. You revived a stopped heart. You can handle this too." The hospital was buzzing. Elena felt like she could practically feel her colleagues' gazes on her. Rumors spread faster than any infection in the medical community. "Did you hear that? They kicked her out. And Jana, you're in favor now." She walked down the corridor, staring straight ahead, her knuckles white, clutching the folder with the patient records. She needed to get through the shift, just do her job, save people, even if her own world was crumbling. "Elena Viktorovna." The voice was low, calm, with a slight croak. Elena shuddered and turned around. The new head of security stood before her, a tall, broad-shouldered man in a uniform shirt that barely contained the powerful sweep of his shoulders. An old scar gleamed white on his temple, receding into his gray-tinged hair. Gleb Romanov. She hadn't seen him for almost 2 years, since that very shift that would forever remain etched in her memory. The memory washed over him suddenly, deafening him with sounds and smells. 2 years ago, in February, an ice storm engulfed the city. The power lines were down. The roads turned into skating rinks, blocked by fallen trees. The hospital was running on generators. Gleb was brought in by a patrol car that had miraculously made it through the traffic jams. He was unconscious, with severe injuries. He was still a member of the emergency services back then, pulling people out of a bus when the structure gave way. It was cold in the operating room, the lights were flickering, the blood pressure was critical. The anesthesiologist's voice was shaking. "Elena Viktorovna, we're losing him. We need blood. Urgently. O negative, rare. Call the blood bank." "There's no connection." The nurse was barely holding back tears, and the car from the transfusion center got stuck on the bridge. "They won't make it, Elena Viktorovna. They'll have to get there in 2 hours. 2 hours." Gleb had only minutes left. Elena watched the monitor, where the lifeline was inexorably straightening. A young, strong man. He had risked himself for others, and now he was leaving because the elements had proven stronger than logistics. The decision came instantly, the only right one at that moment, albeit risky for her career. "Prepare the system for direct transfusion," she commanded. Silence fell in the operating room. "Elena Viktorovna, protocol," the assistant began. "This is a huge risk. My first result is negative. I was tested a month ago. The donor card is clean, a complete compatibility." She tore off her mask. "I won't let him leave while we wait for the car. If you have any questions, I will answer. Prepare the system." No one dared argue. She lay down on the couch next to him, and the eye entered the vein. She saw her dark blood flowing through the tube, giving this stranger a chance. Her head was spinning, and colored spots swam before her eyes, but she continued to monitor the instruments as she lay there, needle in hand. "Hold on," she whispered to herself. "Live." And he survived, against all odds. But Jana, then just a diagnostic doctor who happened to look into the block, saw everything and wrote a report. The scandal was only resolved thanks to the intervention of the head doctor, who valued Elena. But the reprimand remained in her personal file. Gleb stood before her in the corridor, alive and strong. Only the cane in his left hand reminded her of that day. "Hello, Elena Viktorovna." He looked at her with such warmth that Elena's eyes stung. I heard that you're going through difficult times. News travels fast." She tried to smile, but her expression was tense. "Hello, Gleb. I'm glad to see you on your feet. I limp a little, but I can walk." He lifted his cane slightly. "Elena Viktorovna, I'm not a good talker, but I remember. I remember everything, and I know how to pay my debts. If you need help, any kind, with moving, with documents, just a shoulder to lend, just say so." Elena looked at his broad palms, the reliable hands of a man who knows the value of life. She so wanted to accept help now, to stop being strong, but she shook her head. Thank you, Gleb. Thank you sincerely, but this is a family matter. Divorce, division of property. We need lawyers here, not force. I hope to resolve everything peacefully, according to the law. Vadim, the father of my son, according to the documents. We must come to an agreement. Gleb frowned. The scar on his temple twitched. With people like your husband, the law is difficult. Elena Viktorovna, they only understand confidence. Take it. He handed her a simple business card with a number written by hand. Any time, please. She took the card and hid it in the pocket of her robe. Okay, I'll keep in mind. The evening turned out to be windy. Elena hurried to the kindergarten, wrapping herself in her coat. She was afraid of being late. Misha was always upset if he was the last one in the group. A familiar black SUV was parked at the gates of the kindergarten. Elena's heart skipped a beat, a blow. Vadim and here. For 3 years he had never taken Misha. In fact, he tried to pretend the child didn't exist. She quickened her pace and burst into the territory. Vadim was standing near the veranda where the children were playing. Next to him, holding his arm imperiously, stood Zhana. In her new fur coat and perfect hairdo, she looked alien here. Too bright, too provocative. Elena could hardly breathe with indignation. Lena, Zhana noticed her first, and we decided to check on the boy. Vadik was worried about how he was. Elena approached them, trying to shield her son with her body, who, upon seeing his mother, dropped his toys and ran to the gate. What are you doing here? She asked quietly, looking into her husband's cold eyes. You've never been interested in Misha. Why this performance? I have the right to see the child who bears my last name. Vadim answered lazily. And my companion also has the right to become acquainted with the situation. We may have to participate in his upbringing if the court decides that you do not have the conditions for maintenance. Conditions? Elena clenched her fists so that her nails dug into her palms. You yourself deprived us of a home. It was your choice. Vadim shrugged indifferently. Zhana laughed and adjusted a strand of hair that had fallen out of the wind. The gesture was deliberate, theatrical. A hand in a thin leather glove flew up to her face, and something crimson flashed in the light of the lantern. Elena froze. Her gaze was glued to Zhana's ring finger. A ring was worn over the glove. A massive antique gold ring with a large ruby. Her grandmother's ring. A family heirloom that had survived the war and famine. Elena kept it in the safe as a keepsake, hoping to pass it on to her future daughter-in-law. She did not have time. Take it away. The cat was changed. Where from? Elena's voice broke. Take it off immediately. Zhana theatrically spread her fingers, admiring the stone. What are you talking about, darling? Oh, the ring. Vadik gave it to me. He said it was simply made for me. Look how it matches my eyes. Truly a status item. This is my grandmother's ring. Elena stepped forward, forgetting about the witnesses. This is a memento of my family. Vadim. How could you? This is theft. Vadim's expression didn't even change. Don't be dramatic, Lena. Consider it rent. You lived in my house, used my resources, and the ring, it lay unused. It looks good on Zhana. She knows how to wear such things, unlike you. Give it back. Elena reached out to Zhana. Take it off right now. Zhana squealed in fear and hid behind Vadim's back. Vadik, she's insane. Take it away. Vadim grabbed Elena's hand. His grip was tight. Don't touch her, he muttered, leaning towards her face. And don't you dare make a scene. You're nobody, Lena. If I want, I'll take the ring, the child, and ruin your career. Have you forgotten who Zhana's father is? Elena tried to break free, but she had no strength. Tears welled up in her throat from helplessness and humiliation. Misha, seeing this, began to cry behind the low fence of the playground. Let go of your hand. His voice was quiet, but there was such strength in it that Vadim instinctively unclenched his fingers. Gleb stood next to him. He leaned on a cane, but his figure seemed monolithic. He didn't shout, didn't wave his arms. He simply looked at Vadim with a heavy, unblinking gaze. Who the hell are you? Vadim gave the guard an appraising glance, lingering for a moment. Jacket. The one who asks you to behave decently. Gleb took a step, pushing Elena behind him. There are children here, no need to scare them. Vadim grinned. He was used to people opening doors for him and lowering their eyes. And this man looked at him without a trace of fear. Oh, a protector has appeared, Vadim drawled with obvious disdain. He pointedly looked at Gleb's cane. What, disabled? He wanted to be a hero. Covey from here, before they break his other leg. Don't meddle in the affairs of serious people. Elena looked at Gleb with fear, afraid he would lose his temper, but the head of security's face remained calm. Only his eyes darkened. Serious people. They don't grab women by the hands or scare children, Gleb replied calmly, ignoring the insults. Get in the car and take your companion. You're blocking the passage. Are you giving me orders? Vadim began to lose his composure. Yes, I know you, Gleb interrupted. Fire you, destroy you, I know everything. But right now, get in the car and leave, because there's video surveillance here, and the recording of you threatening a woman with a child will be very interesting in the guardianship court. Vadim froze. He looked at the camera hanging on the corner of the building, then at Gleb's calm face, at the tearful Elena, and spat on the asphalt. Let's go, Jana, he said, turning away. There's a bad smell of poverty here. Jana, chin raised proudly and the ruby on her finger flashing, hurried after him, her heels clicking on the wet asphalt. The jeep took off, splashing them with splashes from a puddle. Elena stood, hugging herself. She was shaking slightly. Gleb carefully, as if afraid of frightening her, threw his jacket over her shoulders. It smelled of something soft and reliable. Everything is fine, Elena Viktorovna, he said quietly. They drove away. Go to your son, he needs you more than anything right now. She nodded, wiping away tears. At that moment she realized she was no longer alone. And although she had no home or money, she had something more important. People who do not betray. The morning before, the court hearing was gray and prickly. A low sky hung over the city, threatening either rain or snow, and the wind blew dry leaves across the courtyard. Elena stood by the window of her rented apartment, buttoning her formal blouse. Her fingers trembled. The button refused to go into the loop. The room was quiet, except for the sound of pencils scratching on paper. Misha, who had woken up surprisingly early today, was sitting on the floor in his toy car pajamas, diligently drawing. He stuck out the tip of his tongue in effort, painstakingly drawing lines. Mom, look, he said, picking up the piece of paper. It's us, you, me, and Dad, and the house is big, just like before. Elena felt her heart clench painfully. The drawing showed 3 crooked figures holding hands against the backdrop of a huge orange square with a chimney. For a 3-year-old, the world still felt whole, even though they had moved and Dad had disappeared from sight. A very handsome son. She forced herself to smile as she sat down next to him. You're a real artist. I'll give it to Daddy, Misha declared seriously. We'll see him today. You said he'd come. Elena bit her lip. Vadim really did have to stop by to hand over some additional papers through his lawyer before the hearing so as not to create a circus in court, as he put it in a text message. She hoped he wouldn't even get out of the car, but explaining that to the child was impossible. We'll see, he's little, but Daddy will be very busy. He's rushing to work. I'll be quick. Misha carefully folded the drawing. I'll just give it to him, and that's it. The doorbell rang. It was sharp, demanding. Elena immediately knew who it was. She glanced at her watch. Gleb had promised to be in the yard to back her up, but Vadim had arrived early. She threw on her coat and grabbed her bag with the documents. Misha will stay with Aunt Olya. Okay, she asked, nodding to the neighbor, who agreed to sit with the child for a couple of hours. No, I'm going to Daddy's. Misha slipped under her arm and, wearing only his shoes and a jacket thrown on, ran out into the entryway. Misha, stop! Elena rushed after him. The child trotted down the stairs, clutching his precious drawing to his chest. They ran out into the courtyard. Vadim's enormous black SUV was parked right next to the sandbox, blocking the passage like an alien spaceship that had landed in the old courtyard. Vadim stood next to the car, disgustedly inspecting the mud-spattered fender. Next to him, lawyer Korshunov, a man with darting eyes and a folder under his arm, shifted from foot to foot. "Daddy, Daddy!" Misha's joyful cry broke the morning silence. The boy ran through the puddles to his father, oblivious to the splashes flying on his pants. He was beaming. In his world, Dad was a hero, the strongest and kindest. Vadim turned around. Seeing the child running toward him, he didn't smile or spread his arms for a hug. On the contrary, he took a step back toward the car, his face contorted in irritation. "Daddy, look, this is for you." Misha ran up to him and held out the drawing. His small fingers were covered in felt-tip pen. Vadim looked down at his son as if he were an annoying nuisance. "Careful," he barked, pulling away and brushing off the sleeve of the expensive cashmere coat Misha hadn't even touched. "You're going to get this dirty. Where are you going with dirty hands?" Misha froze. The smile slowly slid from his face. The hand holding the drawing trembled and dropped to his side. "It's a drawing," he said quietly, looking at his father in confusion. "About us." "Put it away," Vadim said coldly, without even glancing at the piece of paper. "Elena!" he shouted, seeing his wife running up. "Take the child. Why is he running around dirty, like a street kid? He should know his place, not throw himself under the feet of adults." Misha winced at the sharp shout. The piece of paper slipped from his fingers and, caught by the wind, fell straight into a dirty autumn puddle. The bright orange house and three figures instantly began to blur, turning into a murky spot. Vadim stepped over the drawing with disgust. "Here are the papers," he nodded to the lawyer. "Read them before the trial and get yourself together. You look pathetic." Elena picked up her son in her arms. Misha didn't cry loudly. He sobbed quietly, soundlessly, burying his face in her shoulder. It was worse than any hysteria. "You're a monster, Vadim," Elena whispered. "How can you? He's little, he loves you." "He's nothing to me," Vadim snapped. "It was just a whim. I warned you." Misha lifted his head from his mother's shoulder. Tears welled in his large eyes. He looked at Elena and asked a question that seemed to stop time in the entire yard. "Mom, Dad didn't take the drawing because I drew it badly. I drew it ugly, didn't I?" Elena caught her breath. How could she explain to a 3-year-old that it's not about the lines and colors, but the callousness of the soul of the one he calls Dad? Suddenly, a shadow appeared nearby, Gleb. He approached silently. Elena didn't even notice when his old car pulled into the yard. Gleb didn't look at Vadim. He dropped to one knee, right onto the wet asphalt. Not caring about his pants in front of the puddle where the ruined drawing lay, he carefully picked up the wet sheet of paper with 2 fingers and shook it, knocking off the drops of dirt. "Not bad," Gleb said in a firm, calm voice, looking the child in the eyes. "You drew it perfectly, soldier. Look at those lines. It's like a tank or a fortress of a house." Misha sniffled. A house. A sturdy house. A truly masculine drawing. Gleb took a clean handkerchief from his pocket and carefully dabbed at the wet spots on the paper. It had suffered a bit in its battle with the weather, but that only added to its value. True masterpieces aren't afraid of water. He stood up and handed the drawing to Misha, smiling with his eyes alone, warm and open. "Here. I'd hang a drawing like that in a prominent place." Misha Robka took the sheet of paper. He looked at Gleb, huge, with a rough scar on his temple, but so calm and kind. Then he turned his gaze to Vadim, who was looking at his watch with irritation. And at that moment, something changed in the child's eyes. Childhood's blind faith cracked. "Thank you," Misha said quietly to Gleb. Vadim snorted. "A touching scene. The drama club is on the move. Let's go, Korshunov. He's biding his time. And you," he looked Gleb up and down, "you'd better do your job, security guard." "That's what I'm doing," Gleb replied calmly, straightening up to his full height, protecting the people from trash. Vadim flushed, wanted to say something, but, meeting Gleb's heavy gaze, remained silent. He slammed the car door so hard the windows rattled. The courthouse greeted them with a booming echo and the smell of institutional dust. The corridors were uneasy. People sat on benches, heads bowed, each immersed in their own misfortune. Elena was nervous, her hands freezing despite the warmth of the room. Korshunov, Vadim's lawyer, walked down the hallway with a triumphant air, whispering with his client. Elena had no expensive defense attorney, only a government lawyer, a tired woman in her 50s who had seen her case for the first time half an hour ago. Rise, court is in session. The hearing began routinely, but Elena sensed a trap being set, and it sprang when Korshunov, straightening his tie, briefly addressed the judge. Your Honor, we would like to introduce a document into the case that fundamentally changes the nature of the property dispute. This is a loan agreement, signed by plaintiff Elena Skvortsova 3 years ago. According to it, she borrowed a large sum of cash from my client's company, comparable to the value of the disputed house. Her share in the property served as collateral. Since the loan has not been repaid, the share is transferred to my client. He placed the paper on the judge's desk. Elena went cold. This is a lie. She jumped up. I didn't sign anything. I've never taken money from the firm. Your signature is here, Elena Viktorovna. Korshunov smiled with just his lips, looking like a shark at that moment. And the date is October 10th of the year before last. The judge, a stern woman in glasses, looked carefully at the document, then at Elena. Plaintiff, is this your signature? Elena looked at the paper the secretary handed her. The signature was frighteningly similar to her own. Someone had diligently practiced drawing those curlicues. Illy remembered Vadim shoving documents at her to sign. Insurance policies, utility bills, school contracts. Sign here, Lena. I'm in a hurry. Could she sign a blank sheet of paper? Panic overwhelmed her. If this document was accepted, she would be left not just homeless, she would be left millions in debt. At that moment, the door to the courtroom opened slightly. Gleb entered. He had no say, he was just a listener. But his presence suddenly gave Elena the ability to breathe. He caught her eye and nodded slightly, touching his breast pocket. The folder. The same folder he gave her this morning before leaving. Look, if they press you with dates. Elena opened her folder with trembling hands. October 10th. October 10th. Your Honor. Elena's voice trembled, but with each word it grew firmer. I ask you to pay attention to the date, October 10th. Do you have evidence? The judge asked boredly. Yes. Here. Elena pulled out the printout Gleb had prepared. It's a billing statement for my phone and an extract from my work timesheet. On October 10th, I accompanied a critically ill patient to Novosibirsk. I was in the air and in a clinic in another city for 2 days. Physically, I could not have signed this agreement in my husband's office, as the lawyer claims. Silence fell in the courtroom. Korshunov stopped smiling. He caught sight of the document in Elena's hands, then cast a quick, angry glance at Vadim. He sat with his fists clenched until his knuckles were white. Show me the documents, the judge demanded. After examining the papers, she removed her glasses and looked at Korshunov with a heavy, piercing gaze. Mr. Attorney, do you understand that attempting to falsify evidence is a criminal offense? If the expert examination confirms that the signature is forged or the document was backdated, Your Honor, there may have been a technical error with the date, Korshunov declared, instantly losing his composure. My client could have made a mistake. We withdraw the motion to admit this document for clarification. Withdrawing? The judge chuckled. Very reasonable. Otherwise, I will be forced to send a private ruling to the prosecutor's office. The meeting was adjourned, but when they went out into the corridor, the atmosphere changed. Vadim no longer looked like he was in control. He was pale with rage. He caught up with Elena at the stairs. Do you think you won? He whispered, grabbing her by the elbow. This is just the beginning. I have enough resources to grind you into dust. You will regret that you did not leave quietly. Take your hand away. Gleb appeared next to him, as if he had grown out of the ground. He did not touch Vadim. He simply stood in such a way that he had to let go of Elena. You, Vadim, he poked his finger into Gleb's chest. You will answer for this. I will find out who leaked the information to you. You will be fired from your job with a black mark. Try it, Glebe answered calmly. But keep in mind, in the forest where everyone is for himself, the winner is not the one who growls louder, but the one who senses the truth. And this is not your office anymore, Vadim Sergeyevich. This is the law. Vadim spat angrily and headed quickly for the exit, where a sweaty and nervous Korshunov was already waiting for him. Elena leaned against the cold wall, her legs buckling from the stress of the past. "Thank you," she whispered to Glebe. "If it weren't for you, I wouldn't have even remembered that business trip." "How did you find out?" Glebe shrugged, and in it there was a gesture of simplicity and reliability. "I am the head of security, Elena Viktorovna. This is my job, to notice details and remember who was where. And people like your husband always make mistakes on trifles, because they think they are smarter than everyone else." Elena looked at him. In the dim light of the hospital corridor, he seemed like a rock. For the first time in a long time, she felt that there was a wall behind her, not made of money and connections, but of honor and conscience. "They will not stop," she said quietly. "I saw his eyes. He'll do anything now. Let them come." Glebe smiled slightly, and the scar on his temple smoothed out. "We'll meet them. Chief Elena Viktorovna, don't be afraid. Fear is their main weapon. And we have the truth and a tank." "A tank?" she asked, not understanding. "The same one from Misha's drawing. A sturdy house that's not afraid of water. We'll hold out." The Novosibirsk train arrived at the platform early in the morning, when the city was still shrouded in a gray haze of fog. Elena descended the carriage steps, feeling the dampness creeping under her coat. The conference trip had been strange, rushed. The order had been signed suddenly, literally shoving her out of the workflow. "You need to unwind, Elena Viktorovna," the chief doctor's secretary said in an unctuous voice, without looking up. And the points for accreditation wouldn't hurt either. For 2 days she sat in the stuffy room, listening to reports she knew by heart, and every free moment she could call her neighbor who was staying with Misha. Her heart was unsteady. Her intuition, honed by years of working in the intensive care unit, signaled danger like a monitor detecting arrhythmia. She didn't stop by home. She went straight from the train station to the clinic. She wanted to quickly immerse herself in her usual rhythm, check on her patients, and make sure everything was under control. The hospital courtyard greeted her with an unnatural silence. Usually at this time, ambulances would be arriving, orderlies would be smoking, and relatives would be handing over packages. Today, the courtyard was empty, and a police car, its flashing lights on but silent, stood at the service entrance. The blue light pulsed, reflecting off the wet asphalt. Elena quickened her pace. The cardiology lobby was quiet, too quiet. The nurse on duty, seeing her, abruptly lowered her gaze and began shuffling papers as if afraid to meet her gaze. "Good morning, Lenotchka." Elena tried to smile. "How was the shift?" Petrov's blood pressure stabilized. The nurse didn't answer. A male voice behind her answered instead. "Citizen Skvortseva." Elena turned around. Before her stood a short, stocky man in a civilian suit that fit him baggily, but neatly. He had the tired face of a man who knows too much about human vices and a sharp, heavy gaze. "Yes, it's me, and you?" "Senior investigator Viktor Petrovich Gromov." He opened his ID card but quickly slammed it shut. "Let's go to your office. We need to talk." "My office?" Elena felt her hands grow cold. What happened? Something with the patients? With the medications? Elena Viktorovna, with the medications. They walked down the corridor. The door to her office, her holy of holies, was sealed with a paper ribbon with blue seals. Jana stood next to her, leaning against the wall with her arms crossed. A triumphant half-smile played across her face, which she didn't even try to hide. "Finally," Jana said, peeling herself away from the wall. "I thought you'd never get here." "Viktor Petrovich, have you already told her what we found during the inventory?" "I'll sort it out myself, Citizen Koryatnikova," the investigator snapped, not raising his voice. "Open up. The witnesses are already here." The office smelled of someone else's perfume, a heavy, sweet aroma that Jana loved. Everything was upside down, books were pushed aside, desk drawers were pulled out. Gromov sat at Elena's desk, pulling the report toward himself. "In your absence, Elena Viktorovna, An unscheduled inspection of the storage conditions of the medications in your personal safe was conducted. He nodded toward a metal box in the corner. Unaccounted for packages of expensive, strictly accountable medications were discovered, the very same ones that were missing from the warehouse a week ago. He also paused. Marked banknotes, presumably obtained from their illegal sale. Elena sank into a chair, her legs giving out. "This is nonsense," she whispered. "I don't have the keys to the warehouse. And the head nurse knows the cat for my safe." She looked at Jana and the head of the diagnostics department, who has duplicates of all the fire safety keys. "Oh, don't shift the blame," Jana threw up her hands. "The duplicates are kept by security, but everyone heard you constantly complaining about a lack of money after the divorce. You decided to rectify the situation at the hospital's expense." Elena Viktorovna, Gromov ignored Jana's outburst. "Do you understand the gravity of the situation? This is a case of grand theft. We have a statement from the clinic's management. Evidence was found in your office. I did not take these medications. I am a doctor. I save lives, not sell pills. We will find out." Gromov stood up. "In the meantime, you are detained for testimony. Please come with us." Silence fell in the office. Elena looked at her hands. Ordinary doctor's hands, with short nails, dry skin from frequent washing. Hands that had held someone's heart, and now they would be handcuffed. She looked up at the investigator. There was no malice in his gaze, only professional routine. He took out the handcuffs, but hesitated. "Viktor Petrovich." Elena's voice wavered, but she forced herself to speak firmly. "I'll go. I'll sign everything that's needed for the arrest report, but I'm asking you." She stepped toward him, forgetting about Jana, about the bruised faces, about the shame. Now it wasn't the doctor speaking in her, but the mother. "Please, call my son, or the neighbor, she's sitting with him." Only she took a convulsive breath, clutching the sleeve of the investigator's jacket as if it were a life preserver. "Don't talk about the police, please. He's only 3 years old. He's already scared. His father abandoned him. If he finds out the police took Mom, he won't survive. Tell him I'm running late on duty, that I'm a difficult patient, that I'll be there soon. Please don't scare him." Gromov froze. He'd seen many suspects. They'd screamed their innocence, threatened to slander their connections, cried over their fates. But this woman, facing a real prison sentence, was thinking first and foremost not about herself, but about the child's psyche. The investigator looked into her gray, pleading eyes. Jana snorted behind her back. "He's playing on Pity, the actress." Gromov slowly put the handcuffs back in their case. "We won't need the handcuffs for now," he muttered. "You go ahead and give your phone to your neighbor." Elena dictated the number with trembling fingers. Gromov took out his cell phone and dialed. "Hello, this is Elena Viktorovna's colleague." "Yes, from work. We have an emergency here. An accident at the substation. All the doctors have been mobilized. Yes, she will be late. Perhaps until the morning. Tell Misha not to worry. Mom will call as soon as she is free. That's it. Goodbye." He hung up and looked at Elena. "Thank you," she muttered. "Let's go," Gromov said dryly. "We'll figure it out." As Elena was being led out of the office, she passed Jana. She stood there, beaming like a polished nickel. "Bye, Lena," she whispered after her. "I think I'll take the office. I like the light here better." Jana was left alone in the office. She walked around the room, running her finger along the spines of Elena's medical encyclopedias. The feeling of victory was more intoxicating than champagne. Everything had gone smoothly. Vadim had organized everything perfectly, and she had played her role brilliantly. Now the way is clear. The position in the cardiology department that she had dreamed of is practically in her pocket. Her father will sign the order as soon as Elena is officially fired under the article. There was a knock on the door. A young nurse, pale, with shaking hands, looked into the office. "Jana Eduardovna, there's no one here. Are you in charge now?" "Well, let's say." Jana Valyajna sat down in Elena's chair, crossing her legs. "What do you have there?" The ambulance brought a man, 50 years old, a businessman, lost consciousness on meeting, pain in the epigastrium, vomiting, paleness. The doctor on duty in the emergency room can't figure it out. KG, it seems clear, but he's getting worse. Epigastric pain? Jana chuckled. It's the stomach. Your businessman got poisoned by oysters. That's all. Rinse his stomach, give him antispasmodics, and send him to gastroenterology. Why panic? But the nurse hesitated. He's very pale and cold, and his back hurts. Elena Viktorovna always said that with symptoms like these, you need to rule out anything. Elena Viktorovna is not here, Jana barked, slamming her palm on the table, and she won't be here. Now I decide. Are you going to teach me diagnostics? I, the head of the department, am following orders. He has acute gastritis. The nurse, her head hunched, ran out of the office. Jana leaned back smugly. Chairs. Idiots, she thought. They can't move without a shepherd. Half an hour passed. Jana was already planning how to rearrange the furniture when a noise started in the hallway. She could hear the clatter of feet, the clanging of a gurney, and abrupt commands. Jana winced in displeasure and went out into the hallway. What's going on here? I told you, to the gastroenterology department. Near the nurse's station, they were fussing around a gurney. The patient, a large man in an expensive suit, was ash gray. He was wheezing, gasping for air. Next to the gurney stood Slava Tsvetkov, a traumatologist who happened to be in the department, bringing in sneeze guards. He was without a gown, in surgical pajamas, and was now furiously commanding the nurses. Morpheus, Cube, get the operating room ready immediately. Call the vascular specialists quickly. Tsvetkov, Jana indignantly said, coming closer. Why are you giving orders here? This is my patient. He has gastritis. I ordered a gastric lavage. Why are you prescribing drugs without my permission? Slava turned to her. His usually cheerful face was distorted with anger. What the hell is gastritis, Jana? Have you even looked at him? He has an aortic dissection. Look. The pressure in his right and left arms is different. The pain is radiating to his back. Another 10 minutes of your lavage and the aorta would have burst. We would have lost him. You're not a cardiologist, Jana shrieked, feeling the ground slipping from under her feet. The mesters looked at her. The orderlies stopped with their mops. Their gazes revealed not fear of their superiors, but outright contempt. I'm in charge here. I forbid it. Get out of here, Slava said quietly, but loud enough for the whole department to hear. Go away, and don't interfere with saving this man before you completely kill him with your incompetence. If he dies, I'll personally go to the prosecutor and testify that you obstructed medical care. Jana opened her mouth to respond, to threaten her father with Vadim's connections, but the words stuck in her throat. She saw the staff's eyes. There was hatred in them. They knew. They all knew that she was a dummy, that without Elena, she was nothing. The gurney was rolled with a roar toward the elevator to the operating room. Slava jumped on top of her, starting CPR, because the monitor began beeping with a solid line. The shock was already coming from the elevator car. Jana was left standing in the middle of the empty corridor. The silence that followed the noise was deafening. "Oh my God!" whispered the old nurse who was washing the baseboard floor. If it were Lenochka, she would have understood right away. She almost ruined a man, God forgive me, and put on the rings, but her head was empty. Jana spun around and ran into Elena's office, slamming the door. Her hands were shaking. She poured herself some water from the decanter, spilling half on the table. It's okay, she thought, swallowing convulsively. It's okay. I'll ask my father. He'll fire that Tsvetkov and that old woman, and I'll be in charge. I'll still be in charge. But somewhere deep inside, a sticky, cold fear was already beginning to squeeze her heart. She understood that today she had lost, and no Vadim, no money could buy her what Elena had, respect and professional talent. The investigator's office was smoky, although Elena hadn't seen Gromov himself with a cigarette. She had been sitting on the half-chair bolted to her. The interrogation was over. The protocol was signed. Gromov was writing something, occasionally casting sideways glances at her. "Viktor Petrovich," she asked quietly, "what now?" "Pre-trial detention. The investigator put down his pen and rubbed the bridge of his nose. According to the law, yes, grand theft, but he paused. Your references, Elena Viktorovna, are perfect. Not a single citation in 15 years. Your patients worship you. Your colleagues, the ones who aren't afraid, also only say good things. He stood up and went to the window. I've made some inquiries, he continued, looking out onto the street. Your ex-husband is currently in the midst of actively dividing up his property. His new flame is eyeing your place. It's a classic. Cui sells, so find out who benefits. Elena raised her head. A glimmer of hope appeared in her eyes. Do you believe me? I believe the facts, Gromov dodged. And the facts are against you for now. But my intuition tells me that you are not the only one with the keys to the safe. And these drugs were done too crudely. Throw them in a personal safe, and with money too. Usually it's smarter. He returned to the table. I'll let you go on bail until the trial, but on one condition. You don't leave the city and show up when called. And stay away from that Jana. She's as dangerous as a monkey with a grenade now. Thank you. Elena exhaled. Tears of relief poured from her eyes. Thank you. I won't let you down. Go to your son, Gromov muttered, burying his face in the paper. The shift was over. Elena left the police station. The evening air seemed sweet to her, like nectar. She was free. For now, free. She took out her phone, 1A missed call from Gleb. She called back. Elena Viktorovna. His voice sounded anxious. Where are you? I'm at the hospital. Something bad happened here. Jana almost killed a patient. Svetkov barely revived him. The entire staff is in a panic, and your office is sealed. They told me. I went out, Gleb, she said, looking at the first stars. They set me up. They accused me of stealing medications, but the investigator, he turned out to be human. I'm going home to Misha. I'll be there in a moment, Gleb said firmly. You shouldn't be alone, and we need to talk. I think I know where to start untangling this mess. Elena hung up. She remembered Gleb's words about the tank. A strong house that isn't afraid of water. We'll fight, she thought, walking to the bus stop. Vadim thought he'd broken me, but he'd only made me angrier. A November evening had descended on the city like a heavy, wet blanket. The streetlights blurred into dull yellow spots through the windshield of an old Niva, parked in the shade of a spreading maple tree. The windshield wipers lazily cleared away the wet snow, producing a rhythmic, soothing squeak. Gleb had been sitting in the car for 3 hours already. It was cool inside. He was saving gas. His gaze was fixed on the entrance to an elite office center across the street. 3rd floor. Corner windows? Eduard Korshunov's law firm. Gleb knew this type of people. They considered themselves masters of life, confident in their invulnerability, the tinted windows of their expensive cars. But every fortress has a weak spot, and every system has cogs that no one notices. The entrance door opened. A short figure in an old down jacket and knitted hat stepped out onto the street. The woman pushed the heavy door open with her shoulder, clutching a worn shopping bag. Maria Ivanovna, the cleaner. Gleb had made inquiries beforehand. A lonely pensioner, 65 years old, lives in an old house on the outskirts. Her only joy and concern is her 7-year-old granddaughter, Elisa. Her daughter had died, and her son-in-law was gone. A classic story of a little person who pulls through life against all odds. Gleb turned the key in the ignition and slowly followed, without turning on the headlights. She walked heavily, limping. The slippery sidewalk was difficult for her. Maria Ivanovna turned into the brightly lit display case of a chain supermarket. Gleb parked and got out too. He needed to understand what kind of person she was, to see her eyes. The store was warm and crowded. Maria Ivanovna seemed to belong here, an unnoticeable shadow among the brightly colored packages. She didn't take the basket, but walked along the aisles, clutching an old wallet. Gleb kept his distance. She stood for a long time at the bread section, picked up a bot, looked at the price tag, sighed, and put it back. She took a social brick of gray bread, put it in her bag, then headed to the dairy section for the most basic carton of milk. But at the checkout, where the change was displayed, she froze. Gleb came closer, pretending to choose a water bottle. Maria Ivanovna stood in front of a display of children's hair clips. Her gaze was fixed on the set. Two bright butterflies with pink glitter, a simple trinket that can become a treasure for a child. She took the package. A soft, apologetic smile appeared on the elderly woman's face. "Alice will be delighted," she whispered barely audibly. She opened her purse and poured change into her palm. She began counting, moving her lips. 1, 2, 5. Counted again. Then she looked at the butterflies, then at the gray bread in her bag. There wasn't enough money. Glebe saw her shoulders slump. The choice was stark: food for dinner or a little joy for the orphan. Marya Ivanovna sighed heavily, tearfully, and slowly began returning the package of hairpins to its place. The light in her eyes faded. She turned to the checkout and began putting out bread and milk. "Do you need a bag?" the cashier asked indifferently. "No, dear, I have my own," Maria Ivanovna answered quietly. At that moment, a large man's hand lay on the tape. Glebe put down a bottle of water, then reached out and took those very same butterflies from the stand, placing them next to the bread. Next, a stick of good sausage, a bag of fruit, and a box of chocolates lay on the tape. "This is not mine," Maria Ivanovna said fearfully, retreating. "You made a mistake." "Don't make a mistake, Mother," Gleb said calmly. "Punch everything together." He quickly paid for the purchase, while the woman looked at him in confusion. "Why are you?" "I can't give it back," she stammered when they walked away. "My pension is not for another week. I know Gleb took the heavy bags. This is a gift for Elisa. After all, she has a holiday soon." Maria Ivanovna froze. Fear gave way to wariness. "How do you know the name of your granddaughter? Are you from Korshinov? Is he testing me?" "No, I'm on the other side." "Let's go to the car, Maria Ivanovna. It's cold here. I'll give you a ride and we'll talk." It was quiet in the car. Belay turned on the heater. "Are you from the police?" she asked. "Former. Now I'm the head of security at the clinic where Elena Skvortsova worked. Have you heard of her?" Maria Ivanovna shuddered. "I've heard. They often talk about her in the office, they laugh. Eduard Viktorovich, he's loud, likes to brag. She's a good woman, they say, a real doctor." "A good one," Gleb confirmed. "She saved my life, and now they're destroying her. Your boss and his clients." "I know," Maria Ivanovna lowered her head. I heard about the medicine, how they planted it." Gleb gripped the steering wheel. "Maria Ivanovna, they took away Elena Viktorovna's house, her job. They're trying to put her in jail, but the worst thing is, they want to take away her son, a little boy of 3. Vadim wants to send him to an orphanage, just to get revenge on his wife." The elderly woman winced as if struck. "An orphanage," she repeated in a trembling voice. "A child with a living mother?" "Yes, I'll make sure the mother is a criminal and the boy is thrown into the system. You know what the system is? You're raising Elisa alone. You know this fear." Marya Ivanovna turned to the window. Her eyes, full of tears, were reflected in the glass. "My daughter, she died 3 years ago. Elisa stayed with me. Child Protection Services came and watched how we lived. They threatened to take her away. I fell on my knees then, swearing that Elisa would have everything. So I went to work in 2 shifts. If only she could sleep at home in her crib." She cried a tear. "I know this fear, son. It's cold. Elena is living with this fear now," said Gleb. "She's afraid for Misha." The car stopped in front of Marya Ivanovna's old house. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. "What can I do? I'm small, inconspicuous, a cleaner. That's precisely why you can do what I can't. You're invisible to them. They say things in front of you that they would never say in front of strangers." Gleb pulled a small black object from his pocket. "It's a voice recorder. I don't need you to risk yourself. Just next time you clean the office before their meeting, leave this somewhere under the table in a flower pot." Marya Ivanovna looked at the device. "If Eduard Viktorovich finds out, he'll destroy me. If he doesn't, I'll be right there. But without proof, We won't save Elena or Misha." The elderly woman was silent. She looked at the bag of tangerines and hairpins on her lap. Then she turned her gaze to the dark windows of her apartment, where her granddaughter was waiting. She imagined strangers coming to this girl and taking her away. Anger rose within her. The anger of sated, contented people who toy with the destinies of children. Injustice. "It burns worse than fire," Maria Ivanovna said quietly. "I've lived honestly my whole life, and they—" She reached out and took the recorder. "They're having a party tomorrow," she said matter-of-factly, putting the device in her pocket. "They're celebrating the victory. They've ordered food. The lawyer likes to talk when the table is set." "Thank you," Gleb exhaled. "You're saving the family." "Go away." She waved her hand. "It's simply inhumane. It's a sin to orphan a child." She opened the car door. "I'll help you carry it." Gleb flinched. "Sit down, honey. I'll walk there myself." "You better tell that woman, Elena. Let her hang in there. Tell her there are people." She got out of the car and walked toward the entrance, her back straight. Gleb watched her go. "There are people," he repeated quietly. "Thank God there are people." He took out his phone and typed a message to Elena. "There is hope, wait." Lawyer Korshnov's office smelled of expensive leather and lemon polish. This smell, designed to instill in clients a feeling of cleanliness and reliability, made Maria Ivanovna feel nauseous. She slowly ran a damp cloth along the long conference table, trying to stop the trembling in her hands. Today, everything was to be decided. In the pocket of her old work robe lay the small black device Gleb had given her. It seemed hot, like a red-hot coal burning through fabric. "For Lenochka," she whispered under her breath, wiping away the dust. "From the massive armchair, for the sake of her boy, and for the sake of my Alice." There were minutes left before the owners arrived. Maria Ivanovna looked around. Where? Under the table. They'd noticed behind the cabinet the sound wouldn't be recorded from too far away. Her gaze fell on the floor-standing ficus plant, standing in the corner, next to the chair where Korshinov usually sat. The plant was lush. The soil in the pot was loose, covered with decorative stones. She quickly, glancing at the door, approached the ficus, took out the recorder with trembling fingers, and started recording. The tiny light flickered and went out, as Gleb had explained, and he slid the device between the stones and the rim of the pot, covering it with a wide sheet. Her heart was pounding so hard that it echoed with the roaring in her ears. She grabbed a bucket and mop, hastily retreating to the door. At that moment, the door swung open. Eduard Korshunov entered the office, flushed, loud. Vadim walked in behind him, leisurely and in a businesslike manner. Zhana brought up the rear, rustling bags from an expensive restaurant. "Oh, Maria Ivanovna!" Korshunov barked. "What are you messing around here for? I told you, everything should be sparkling by 6. I've already finished." "Eduard Viktorovich." Maria Ivanovna hunched her shoulders, trying to be inconspicuous. "I'll just take the trash." "Come on, hurry up, we have a meeting. Not for prying ears." He waved his hand, as if shooing away an annoying fly. Maria Ivanovna backed into the corner, pretending to fiddle with the trash can. She needed to make sure they would sit down, that the conversation would begin. Zhana threw her fur coat onto the sofa and began unloading the contents of the bags onto the polished table. The plastic containers opened with a juicy click. The air filled with the smell of smoked meats, fish, and expensive cheese. "Well, gentlemen?" Vadim plopped down in a chair, loosening his tie. "You can breathe a sigh of relief." The investigator swallowed the case. "My ex is sitting on her own recognizance, her coconut leaf trembling. The trial is in 2 days, and we'll finish her off there. And I told you so." Zhana laughed, popping a tartlet with red caviar into her mouth. "The main thing is to play the drug card wisely. Gromov, of course, a watchdog, but he won't fight the evidence. The medicine is in the safe." "In the safe. She has the key." "She has it." "Brilliant." Korshunov poured the amber liquid into glasses. "Vadim Sergeyevich, to your health." "We pulled off the drug forgery scheme flawlessly. I was the security guard at the entrance. The cameras accidentally turned off for maintenance. No one will poke a sniffle." Maria Ivanovna, standing in the shadows by the door, froze. They weren't even embarrassed. They talked about it like the weather, munching on delicacies. "And where is the boy?" Korshunov asked, leaning back in his chair. "To an orphanage? That's exactly where he belongs." Vadim grimaced, spreading butter on a bun. "I don't want to pay for elements of someone else's puppy. Child protection is already at a low start. As soon as Lenka is convicted, the boy will be taken away. I feel a little sorry for her." Zhana giggled, but her eyes remained cold. "Although no, I don't feel sorry." She was too correct. "I'm a doctor. I don't sell my conscience." "Well, now let them sell cigarettes in a cell." They laughed, well-fed, satisfied, confident in their impunity. Marya Ivanovna looked at them, and the fear in her soul gave way to cold rage. They ate caviar, drank an expensive drink, and somewhere Elena was crying from helplessness, not knowing if she would see her son tomorrow. She squeezed the handle of the mop, so much so that her knuckles turned white. "It is necessary to leave. Gleb is waiting outside. The recording is in progress." She took a step toward the door, but the old bucket's handle treacherously jingled. Korshunov turned his head sharply. His gaze, clouded with satiety, focused on the cleaning lady, then slid around the room. He was paranoid, and in his profession this quality had saved him more than once. "Stop!" he barked. Marya Ivanovna froze. "Eduard Viktorovich, I'm going." "I said stop." He stood up, leaning heavily on the table. "What are you warming your ears with, old man? And why is the ficus moved? I always turn its leaves towards the window, but it's turned around." Maria Ivanovna's insides broke. Korshunov walked quickly to the rink. Vadim and Zhana fell silent, stopping chewing. The lawyer stuck his hand in the ground, parted the leaves, and pulled out a small black device. "Oh, you!" he hissed, looking at the blinking light. "Are you writing us? Are you writing?" He threw the recorder on the table, right into the plate with cold cuts. "Who did this to you?" he yelled, advancing on the woman. "Who are you leaking to? Gromov or that lame guard? Speak." Marya Ivanovna backed away, her back pressed against the cold wall. There was catastrophically little air. In her chest, where her heart was, a red-hot spring suddenly unclenched and then contracted again. The pain was so sharp that it darkened before her eyes. I am for the truth," she croaked, clutching her chest with her hand. "For the truth?" Vadim came closer, his face twisted with anger. "Do you even understand what we will do to you? You will rot. Your granddaughter will go broke. We will grind you to dust." The word granddaughter hit harder than a scream. "Alice." Marya Ivanovna exhaled. Her legs gave way. She began to sink to the floor, slowly, clinging to the wall with weakening fingers. The bucket of dirty water tipped over, and a gray puddle spread across the expensive parquet, reaching Vadim's patent leather shoes. "Hey, what are you thinking?" Korshunov jumped back in disgust. "Get up. Don't play the fool." Marya Ivanovna fell onto her side. The world narrowed to a narrow strip of light, and the smell of lemon polish mixed with the smell of fish. The pain in her chest became unbearable. She tried to breathe, but her lungs wouldn't cooperate. She felt ill, she thought. Zhana's voice sounded far away, as if through cotton wool. "Vadik, she's having an attack." "I don't care." Vadim's voice was harsh. "Let fewer witnesses die." Marya Ivanovna saw their legs, expensive shoes, leather boots. They stood around her and looked, simply looked. No one bent down, no one took out a phone to call an ambulance. They stood and waited for the problem to resolve itself. Her gaze fell on the baseboard. Alice. Her granddaughter's face appeared before her eyes, clear, pure eyes. "Granny, will you come to the party? Will you braid my hair?" Alice. Marya Ivanovna's lips moved, but there was almost no sound. She had a party tomorrow, a white gang. Who would help her? A tear rolled down her wrinkled cheek and mixed with the dirty water on the floor. They thought they had broken the recorder, but they didn't know that Gleb had taught her to be on the safe side. A small memory card, a backup, was in her hand under a handkerchief in her pocket. With a final effort of will, gathering the remnants of her fading life while they argued over her head, she unclenched her fingers. A small piece of plastic slid into the crack under the baseboard right next to her hand, out of sight. The light dimmed. Glebe burst into the office, slamming the door open with his shoulder when the silence beyond became too terrifying. He saw a scene that would forever be burned into his memory. A luxurious table piled high with food, red caviar glistening in the lamplight, bottles and 3 people frozen in the poses of frightened predators. And on the floor, in a puddle of dirty water, lay a small, shriveled figure in a blue robe. An ambulance! Glebe barked, rushing toward her. He fell to his knees, ignoring the water, and felt for her pulse on her carotid artery. Silence. A terrible, cottony silence lay beneath his fingers. "Maria Ivanovna," he whispered. "Mother, what's wrong? Don't you dare." He began pumping her heart. Once, twice, 3 times. His ribs cracked under his heavy hands. Inhale. Again. "It's useless." Korshunov's voice rang out from above. It was filled with fear mixed with relief. "Heart, we have nothing to do with this." She fell on her own. Glebe slowly raised his head. He stopped pumping. The look in his eyes became such that Jana, standing behind Vadim, quietly squealed and backed toward the window. He slowly stood up. Dirt from the floor dripped from his trousers. "You stood and watched," he said quietly. It wasn't a question. She was having a seizure, and you ate and watched. She was spying. Vadim squealed, trying to put on a brave face. She planted a bug. There it is on the table. This is illegal. We will sue you and her too. Glebe stepped to the table and picked up the broken cutlery. "You killed her," he said. "Not by hand, indifference, abandonment in danger. Article 125, Ukrev. Prove it." Korshunov snapped, though the submachine gun was rolling down his face like hail. The words of a security guard against the words of respected people. "The horror has been destroyed. There is no recording." Gleb looked at the floor, where Maria Ivanovna's hand lay. The edge of the memory card was barely visible, black, right next to the baseboard. She made it. Even dying, she outplayed them all. He discreetly stepped on that spot with his boot, blocking the evidence from prying eyes. "There is a recording," Gleb said, looking into Maria Ivanovna's empty eyes. "And God exists." He took out his phone. "Police. We have a corpse and 3 suspects." Investigator Gromov closed the folder with a resounding bang, which in the silence of the office sounded like a starting pistol. He rubbed his tired eyes, leaned back in his chair, and looked at Elena with a long, searching gaze. A gloomy November morning was breaking outside, but to her the gray light seemed brighter than the summer sun. "Are you free to go, Elena Viktorovna?" he said in a voice that, for the first time, lacked the formal dryness. "You have been cleared of all suspicion. The criminal case against you has been dismissed due to lack of evidence. Moreover, you are now listed as a victim." Elena sat there, unable to move. The tension of the last few days, which had held her like a taut steel spring, suddenly snapped, leaving behind a ringing weakness in her knees and a slight tremor in her hands. She was afraid to believe what she was hearing, afraid it was some kind of mistake or a cruel joke. "And the recording?" she asked quietly, her voice trembling. "The one the police found. The recording has been added to the case file." Gromov nodded, tapping his pen on the table. "The forensic analysis confirmed the authenticity of the voices. They contain everything they need: a confession to planting drugs, a conspiracy to deprive you of your parental rights, and the circumstances of Maria Ivanovna's death. The charge is abandonment." "This is serious, Elena Viktorovna, very serious." He paused, as if choosing his words. "Gleb Romanov has already testified. He is waiting for you in the hallway. Go home to your son. This nightmare is over for you." Elena stood up, her legs weak as if they didn't belong to her, but she forced herself to take a step, then another. The police station hallway smelled of old paper and cold coffee. Gleb sat on a wooden bench near the exit, his hands clasped, looking at the floor. Hearing the door open, he stood abruptly, forgetting his cane. They stood facing each other for a second that seemed like an eternity, without unnecessary words, without theatrical gestures. Glebe simply stepped forward and embraced her gently but firmly, as if shielding her from the world, from all its troubles and injustices. Elena buried her face in his jacket, which smelled of the street and rain, and for the first time in a long time she allowed herself to cry not from fear, but from incredible relief. "Is it over?" he asked quietly, stroking her hair. "Yes," she breathed. "Thank you." "If it weren't for you, if it weren't for Marya Ivanovna," he corrected her seriously, and his voice was filled with deep sadness. "This is her victory. Let's go. We still have much to do." The hospital was unusually quiet that morning, like before a storm. Jamna sat in the director's office, which she had occupied without permission the day before, shuffling through papers. Her hands were shaking treacherously. After yesterday's incident with the patient saved by Tsvetkov, the staff hadn't spoken to her. The nurses pretended not to hear her orders. The orderlies averted their eyes, and behind her she could hear whispers. She tried to call Vadim, but a mechanical voice informed her that the subscriber was unavailable. Korshunov wasn't answering either. "It's okay," she whispered to herself, subtly touching up her lips in front of a small mirror. "Father will sort everything out. Vadim will decide. I'll stay here anyway. Winners are not judged." The door swung open without a knock. Jana spun around, ready to reprimand her for insubordination. But her words caught in her throat. Two police officers and investigator Gromov stood in the doorway. Behind them, doctors and nurses were already gathering in the hallway, attracted by the noise. "Miss Koretnikova Zhana Eduardovna?" One of the officers asked dryly. "Yes." "What's the matter?" Zhana's voice broke. "You have no right to barge in. I'm a doctor. I have patients. You are under arrest on suspicion of theft of medications, slander, and endangering a person resulting in death," the officer stated firmly, pulling out handcuffs. "Please follow us." "This is a mistake?" Jana backed away, knocking over a glass of water on the table. The water ran over important documents, but she didn't care. "It wasn't me. It was Vadim. He made all this up. I just wanted to help. I didn't know. Call my father." As they led her out into the hallway, handcuffs snapped onto her gold-cuffed wrists. She saw the faces of her colleagues. Slava Tsvetkov stood with his arms crossed over his chest, looking at her with heavy, cold contempt. The old nurse, whom Jana had humiliated yesterday, crossed herself. "What a disgrace," the doctor whispered in the crowd. "But you've ruined a man." Jana searched the crowd for sympathy, but found only condemnation. The very boomerang she had launched had returned, striking her in front of everyone whose respect she had so desperately sought to buy, but failed to earn. The task force arrived at the Skvortsov mansion an hour later. Vadim, unaware of what was happening in the city, drank coffee in the living room, scrolling through the news on his tablet. He was sure Korshunov had already resolved the matter and made it look like an accident. The doorbell rang persistently and slowly. "Who else is there?" he muttered discontentedly, going to answer it. "Inessa, are you waiting for someone?" Inessa Pavlovna was coming down the stairs, shivery, wrapping her shawl around herself. "No, son, probably the courier." Vadim swung the door open and took a step back. Men in uniform stood on the porch. "Vadim Sergeyevich Skvortsov." Gromov stepped into the hallway without waiting for an invitation. "You're under arrest. Are you in your right mind?" Vadim tried to feign righteous anger, although inside he felt a chill. "Do you know who I am? I'll call you now." "Call anyone you want," Gromov interrupted calmly. "We have an audio recording from your lawyer's office and witness statements. Get ready." As Vadim, pale and having lost all his polish and confidence, was being loaded into a police car, he still tried to shout something, promise money, threaten, but no one listened. Inessa Pavlovna stood on the porch of the huge, empty house. The wind fluttered the hem of her shawl. She watched as her son, her pride, her only hope, was taken away. "Vadik," she whispered, taking a helpless step forward. But the car drove away. The heavy gates slowly closed, cutting her off from the world. She was left alone. The silence in the house, which they had so carefully shielded from strangers, suddenly became deafening, oppressive. This house contained many expensive things, antique furniture, paintings in gilded frames, but there was not a single person in it who would need Inessa Pavlovna. She suddenly remembered Elena, her daughter-in-law's warm hands, her soft voice, the smell of oatmeal in the morning. Elena was the only one who genuinely cared for her when she was helpless, the only one who loved her not for money, but simply as a human being. Inessa Pavlovna looked at her hand, the same one she had disgustingly wiped with her sleeve after Elena's touch. She suddenly felt cold, terribly cold, so cold that even her expensive wool shawl offered no warmth. She slowly closed the heavy oak door, locking herself in her golden vault, alone with the realization. She had, with her own hands, driven the only true warmth from her life. Maria Ivanovna's small apartment was sparse, but very clean. A photograph of a woman in a mourning frame stood on the table, and a lamp burned nearby. A guardianship official, a withered woman with a folder, was filling out paperwork at the kitchen table. Little Elisa sat on the sofa, clutching a stuffed bunny with a missing ear, and stared into space with dry, tear-reddened eyes. She understood everything. Her grandmother was gone. And now they would take her to that same state-run institution that her grandmother always threatened her with when she told her to be careful. Just a few things, the employee muttered, not looking at the child. "We'll call a car now." "Girl, get ready for the door." The doorbell rang. Who else is there? The woman from Child Protection Services asked discontentedly and went to open the door. Elena and Gleb were standing on the threshold. "Who are you?" The employee asked in surprise. "We're here for Elisa," Elena said firmly, walking into the room. She immediately knelt down in front of the girl. "Hello, Elisa. I'm Lena, and this is Uncle Gleb. We knew your grandmother. She was a very good person. She saved us." Elisa looked up. There was so much adult, unchildlike melancholy in them that Elena's heart sank. "Did Grandma die?" the girl asked quietly. "Yes, she was little, but she begged us to take care of you." Gleb crouched down next to her. "You don't know us, but we won't let anyone hurt you." "Citizens, what are you doing?" The social worker intervened. "You have no rights. The girl is going to the distribution center. There is a procedure. The procedure will be followed." Gleb stood up, straightening up to his full height and shielding the child with his body. "We are filing for temporary guardianship right now. I have already called the head of your department. Considering the circumstances of the grandmother's death and our wishes, I think the issue will be resolved quickly. But you are strangers. The woman did not relent. Why do you need someone else's child? It is responsibility, expenses." Elena took Elisa's small, cold hand in hers. "There are no other people's children," she said quietly but firmly. "We already have a son. There is enough love for a daughter. Maria Ivanovna saved my family. Now it's my turn." Elisa suddenly let go of the hair and pressed herself against Elena. She did not know this aunt, but she smelled of something familiar, warm, safe. And Uncle Gleb's eyes were kind, like that teddy bear from "You Won't Give Me Up?" She whispered. "Never," Gleb promised. The officer's word. The guardianship employee looked at them, sighed, and closed the folder. "Okay, write your statement. If your living conditions allow, we'll try to keep it." 6 months later. The May evening was warm and full of lilacs. A light breeze blew through the small open window in the cozy kitchen, stirring the light curtains. This wasn't the huge, cold mansion Elena had lived in before. It was a solid wooden house in the suburbs, which Gleb had finished building with his own hands. There were no marble floors or gilding, but there were wooden floorboards that warmed up in the sun, and a large round table with enough space for everyone. Elena was cutting apple pie. She smiled, listening to the children's voices ringing in the garden. Misha and Elisa were kicking a ball around. Elisa had thawed out over the past 6 months and started laughing again, and Misha followed her like a little tail, proud of the fact that that he now has an older sister. The door opened, and Gleb came in. He was wearing work clothes. He smelled of wood shavings and fresh air. His limp had become almost unnoticeable. Good doctors and care had done their job. Papa Misha flew into the kitchen and ran into Gleb's legs. We scored a goal. Alisa is the goalkeeper, and I'm the striker. Well done. Gleb picked the boy up in his arm and threw him up to the ceiling. Wash your hands at the table. Mom baked a pie. Dad. Elena froze every time she heard this word. Misha started calling Gleb that. A month after they started living together, no one asked him to. Children just sense who their real father is. Not the one who gave them their last name, but the one who fixes the bike, reads them bedtime stories, and carries them on their shoulders. Gleb put Misha on the floor, walked up to Elena, and hugged her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. Little tired. Nice. Fatigue. She covered his hands with hers. Gleb carefully took her left hand. On her ring finger, the old, heavy ruby ring was no longer there. It belonged to the past, like evidence in a criminal case, like a symbol of a life built on lies. Elena refused to take it from the police. In its place, a new ring shone silver on her finger, simple, made of white gold, with a small row of clear cubic zirconia. Gleb had given it to her when they applied to the Legislative Assembly. It's pure, he had said then. No past. Only our future. What are you thinking about? He asked. Elena looked at the shelf where a photograph in a simple wooden frame stood. Marya Ivanovna looked out from it, tired, wearing a headscarf, but with a kind, bright smile. Next to the photo stood a small vase of fresh flowers, which Elisa brought every day. About her, Elena said quietly. About the price that had to be paid. Gleb was silent. Justice is an expensive thing, Lena. Sometimes too expensive. But if she hadn't decided then, we wouldn't have this evening. Elisa wouldn't be with us. I know. I just want her to see us now. She sees, Gleb said confidently. I know for sure. Elisa ran into the kitchen, flushed and with her pigtails disheveled. Mom, Dad, she shouted from the doorway. There's a real hedgehog there, asking for milk. Elena and Gleb exchanged glances and laughed. There was so much life in this Mom-Dad, so much simple human happiness that cannot be bought, stolen, or faked. Let's go feed the hedgehog, Elena said, taking off her apron. They went out into the garden. The sun was setting behind the tops of the pine trees, bathing the world in golden light. Vadim and Zana received real prison sentences. Korshinov lost his license and was under investigation. Inessa Pavlovna lived like a recluse in her empty house, alone with her pride. The boomerang returned to everyone who threw it. And here, in this small house, lilacs bloomed. Children fed the hedgehog milk from a saucer, and men and women held hands, knowing that they had their whole lives ahead of them. A life they deserved. A life rightfully deserving of happiness. Dear listeners, life sometimes destroys an old building so that you can build a real palace in its place. The text was read by Vitaly especially for the Dom de Raskazov channel. Your likes for us are a quiet knock on the door of our home, a sign that the story has resonated in your soul. And a subscription is the key that will always open the door to new encounters. Tell us, how have you experienced similar moments? Did you have the strength, like the heroine, to start over? Or do you know other ways to emerge from such darkness into the light? Share your experiences in the comments, because your stories may warm someone else's heart. Take care of yourself and believe in your right to happiness. Until next time.